Rick, thank you for joining us on AIME TV. There's a bunch of kids on the other side of this screen that are wondering what your story is and what brought you where you are today.
Yeah, well, I loved playing sport at school, played cricket and hockey and footy. Finished school, went to university in Western Australia, studied medicine and played a lot of sport, particularly then cricket and hockey. I finished university, worked at the Perth Medical Centre for a number of years in the hospital, then worked in general practice. At the same time I was playing cricket. I played for Western Australia in cricket in the 70s, and I played hockey for Western Australia and Australia in the 70s and 80s. After I'd been working in general practice for a while, I decided I wanted to do some more study in medicine, but another political chance came along, so I got an opportunity to go in the Parliament. I spent a decade in the Federal Parliament in Canberra. I spent nearly a decade coaching the women's national team, who won the gold medal in Atlanta and Sydney Olympics. Then I did some other things. I wrote a book. I lived for a while in Italy. I spent 2 years in New Zealand with New Zealand cricket. I then worked in India with the Indian Hockey Federation. Came back to Australia, and from 2008 until 14 I coached the men's hockey team. We won the World Cup twice, and we slipped up in the London Olympics. We got the bronze medal. We were disappointed by that. Now I've got two boys still at school. I spend some time coaching them. I do a bit of talking, work with the AFL and coaching development, some other things like that.
There's a variety of human beings you must have dealt with over the course of your life. What have you found out about the human spirit on your journey?
You need to challenge people. People want the opportunity to succeed. They want so you've got to create an environment in which they have a learning experience and they get the opportunity to succeed. And you make a mistake if you don't provide that opportunity. The most important thing you have as a coach in your armoury, I think, is to say to someone, I believe you can do it. I trust you. I'm confident you can do it.
Have you got a story of a moment where you felt like you really nailed that with a player?
Oh,
or
I think
person?
you do that all the time. Here's a story though. In 1994, I'd been the coach of the national team for a couple of years with the women. I was still learning at the time. I remember going to the national championships and I saw a young girl from Victoria I thought was interesting, and I said to the selectors, what about her? And they said, oh, she's not good enough. She used to be in the team before you were the coach. And I watched for another day or two and I thought, oh, you know, she's an interesting player. She could add to our team. And I went and spoke with that girl and I said to her, tell us your story. She said, I used to be in the program before you were the coach. I went to Perth and trained at the AIS for 2 years. I've been overseas with the national team 5 times. I've played 11 minutes. I don't know how you can decide if anyone's any good from 11 minutes. It's not enough, you know, and she had been sat on the bench. When you sit someone on the bench, you're effectively saying to them, I don't believe you can do it. We eventually included her in the program. I convinced the selectors we should. She got a knee injury a year or two later. She didn't play very long for Australia, but the last match she played for Australia was the Olympic final in 1996. That girl's a gold medalist now. And they'd told me that she wasn't good enough, you know. Here's another story. It's a story from history, and probably the kids here wouldn't know who Winston Churchill was. He led the Allied forces against the Germans in World War II. He was 60 years old before he became Prime Minister. So, and he'd had a lot of failures in his life up until then. Later on in his life, he was invited to go to Oxford University to speak to the students who were beginning the university course. And Churchill was remembered because he had a bowler. He used to wear a bowler hat. He used to smoke a cigar, and he had a walking cane.
And drink a fair bit of whiskey.
He did drink a bit of whiskey too. we don't necessarily think that's important for him. But he was invited to go there, and the students were told, the great man is coming. You know, this is after he was had been the Prime Minister for a long time, and all the students were there expectantly and everyone was quiet. And he took off his bowler hat and put it on the lectern, his cigar on the edge, and put his cane against there, and he stood there, and as all great orators do, he took his time and he said, never, 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 never give up. And he picked up his hat and his cane, his cigar and walked off the stage. That was it. They were all primed for the big speech. But that was the message that he got, never give up.
Are there other teachers you've looked at to borrow from and been guides along the way?
When you're a coach, you're always looking for other people saying the same sorts of things to give messages, and I wrote a book a few years ago called Shakespeare the Coach. Shakespeare's 400-year-old famous playwright, not so relevant it seems to many young people these days, but some of the messages from Shakespeare 400 years old are just as important as they are today. And I was always looking for quotes from other athletes, from coaches, from people in history, from writers, and one of my favourite quotes from Shakespeare is this one: "Our doubts are traitors, and makes us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt." Our doubts are traitors, and makes us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. We're afraid to have a go, we're afraid to seem different, we're afraid to stand out so we don't contribute, we don't have a go at things because it might not work. Well, there's no disgrace in having a go and not succeeding, or failing sometimes. That's in fact how you learn.
And in that learning, you've got some thoughts on the styles and mistakes there are as well. Is it 3 mistakes or 3 forms of mistakes that you look at when the learning process happens?
You make mistakes because you're careless. We don't like those as a coach, You make mistakes because you didn't have a go, you were afraid, or you were indecisive. We don't like those ones. You make mistakes because you're trying to do something, and they're the ones we want you to make. The mistakes of what we call commission, going for it. Everybody has those doubts. Let's understand it. That quote from Shakespeare, everyone's got doubts. I remember Roger Federer being interviewed before the final of the Australian Open 10 years ago, when he was the best player in the world, unquestionably. And he was talking about, well, I haven't had as good a preparation, my forehand's not happening as well as it normally would, it's very hot, am I ready to play a long game? So if the best player in the world's got them, then everyone has them, and we're all beset by them. And it's learning to actually push into that area, to take a chance, to back yourself. That is so important, and sometimes you feel uncomfortable there. But to be an elite athlete and to succeed, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to understand you can be average and ordinary and just blend in, but if you really want to pop your head up and take a chance, then that's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel difficult sometimes. There's no better example in my lifetime than Kathy Freeman in Sydney in the 400 metres. Everybody expected her to win. And this didn't happen on the day, this had built up over the time. She was there at the opening ceremony lighting the flame, so the spotlight was on Kathy for so long, The interesting thing that Kathy said is that she had learned to cut out the other things and just focus on the task. And the critical first lesson in sports psychology is you focus on the task, the outcome looks after itself. And that was an example of someone under enormous expectation and pressure being able to just focus on the task. Whether you're at school, whether you're in your family at home, whether you're in a sporting team, whatever the environment, you're in the work environment, that's what you have to do. It's task focus that's important.
Have you got a final message for the youngsters on the other side of the screen? They're at that 14, 15, 16-year-old age.
Well, I reckon I've got a 14 and a 16-year-old at home now.
You're an expert then.
I'm not an expert, I wish I was. But I know life is difficult and complicated, and it seems like everybody's judging you and measuring you, and you feel like you want to be tested against everyone else. You've got to find your things, what works for you. You've got to find those people who support you, and you've got to connect with your friends and connect with those people who are providing you with advice. You need to listen, but you don't necessarily have to follow every piece of advice. You've got to measure it for yourself. And your best friends are the people who tell you like it is, not the ones who sugarcoat the messages.
Ric, thanks for joining us on AIME TV. Good on you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
There you guys.